Hello and welcome to Love and the Planets, and we're looking at the week of March 26th, and I'm Margaret Gray in a gorgeous sunny Dublin.
And I'm Armand Diaz in the New York area where it's cloudy, but
You've just got to move to Ireland, Armand, that's it.
I don't know, you guys have had some weather over there recently, snow.
True, we had snow, it's crazy. So we've got quite a week in store. I mean, really, we've got starting with this, full moon in Libra. This is a pretty important full moon, Armand. You were saying some very interesting things about it just before we started.
Well, starting in terms of priority, but it's actually at the end of the week. It's on Saturday that we have the full moon in Libra. And, of course, first of all, that's the take-home message is full moons are typically fun, and Aries, the sun is in Aries, which is fun, and other stuff. And the full moon in Libra highlights relationships and relationship issues and interpersonal dynamics. So it is a big time, and it should be fun, and it should be interesting, and it should be very illuminating for relationships. But before we get there, before we find that Libran harmony and balance, we have a few aspects that we have to sort of trip over on the way, including Venus conjunct Uranus on Thursday, followed by the Sun square Saturn. And we'll be building to these all week long. I think it's the weather of the week. I don't think it even matters what day you're talking about all that much. There's little individual flavor variations, but I don't know. I mean, what's your impression of Venus and Uranus in Aries?
I think it's a lovely way to describe it, kind of that we're tripping over it, and I think it's a great way to describe Venus and Uranus because there's an erratic quality about it. It's very much that kind of sense of sudden things happening and very relevant, of course, to relationship, but also new things happening. So there is kind of a feeling about it that it could be very refreshing as well. We've talked before about how we've gone through all these Piscean Neptunian energies, and the Chiron Sun conjunction has been brought up a lot of grief and so on, and this feels like really a bit of spring cleaning. It's like, let's just clear out the old and start with the new. Now, that can feel sometimes a little uncomfortable. It depends by people's individual charts and by the composite chart, because if a composite chart is very airy or fiery, then the Venus-Uranus can feel very refreshing. If it's a very earthy, watery chart, then it might feel just a little jagged.
Yeah, I think that it is going to be easier for fire and air signs. You're right about that. I feel that it is it's the type of energy that it strikes me as being one that if you're in a good place in your relationships, it's very much refreshing. We've done a lot of work over the last couple of months. Let's start anew. And it's charged. It's at the full moon time, so it's charged. So let's go and do some stuff. If you're not in such a good place, and this full moon is illuminating a relationship that is not necessarily so harmonious, this could be a very jagged, very edgy type of time. Fire and air signs will have an easier time dealing with the energy, but they may also be a little bit more impulsive with this energy. So, you kind of want to be sure what you're doing. I guess that's always the case.
It's so true. Now, I think the Sun square Saturn that comes the next day, that might be helpful in a way because it puts a little bit the brakes on. It also helps to manifest things. So, for example, if you're meeting somebody new, just starting to date somebody, then the Sun square Saturn can help maybe solidify it a little bit. So, it just slows things down a little bit in preparation for the full moon. Now, one of the things we didn't mention coming up to the full moon is also that Venus goes into Taurus. So, I think that's just a lovely aspect for relationships. It's a lovely sign, I should say, for Venus to go into because she's happy in her own sign of Taurus. It's extremely sensual. It's extremely, very concerned about the beauty of relationships. That kind of really energetic flow that can come when a relationship is going well. So it's really a nice thing to happen with that full moon.
Well, I agree. And let's remind people that on relationshipsandastrology.com on that Thursday beforehand, I'll be posting the blog about Venus in Taurus. So you will want to check that out and get a sort of sense of the weather for the next 3 or 4 weeks. I agree entirely. I think Venus, though, she's in Aries for most of the week. And then right before the full moon, she sort of slips into her own sign of Taurus. And, she's the ruler of Libra. She's the ruler of the moon at this time. And so she slips into Taurus. It's kind of like, I like to kind of get out of the way of some of the Aries Libra dynamic there. I'm going into my other home and sort of making myself comfy. I've done my part for the week type of thing. But I agree with you that it certainly helps to ground things. It helps to, another thing that maybe helps to slow things down a little bit and prevent some of the impulsivity that may be in the full moon.
Yeah, I think that's important. Now, it's interesting because also you mentioned impulsivity, and of course, the full moon is square Mars and Saturn together. So I think this is also quite interesting in Capricorn. So there's a little bit of a mixed message. On the one hand, take some action, but it's a Capricornian action. So it's very tenacious, and it's very much about, with that Mars in Capricorn, putting in strong foundations. So I think back to what you mentioned, Armand, earlier, that if relationships are doing well, this is another opportunity to maybe put in some really good foundations and work on that. If they're not doing so well, maybe it's a time to review those foundations and check where we want to go, particularly with this full moon being sextile the North Node. So I think that really brings us back to the place of heart. I often say to people, if you're stuck and you don't know what to do in a relationship, just really focus on your heart. What does your heart want? And then move from that place. And I think that's particularly important with this full moon.
It is such an important message, Margaret. And I think it is beyond everything else. All of these astrological energies that swim around, it's like the weather, rain, and then there's wind, and then there's snow, and all of this type of thing. And then there's sunny days. And all of that affects you. It affects your mood. It affects what you do, to an extent. But when you're really grounded in yourself, when you're really grounded in your heart, the weather doesn't make that much of a difference, and neither does the astrological weather. The things that blow us around and shake us up are the things that, in a sense, remind us to look within. It tells us there's a stress here, there's a problem there, there's an opportunity over here. But those things are relative to what's going on at a deeper soul level that is sort of above and beyond the astrological energies.
Absolutely. That's a beautiful way to put it, Armand. And I think on that note, we'll say goodbye to everyone, and I look forward to seeing you next week.
Bye-bye, Margaret.
Bye-bye.